Test tube babies, donor sperms, genetic testing. For years, humans have used technology to reshape the way we reproduce. But egg freezing, one of the latest technologies, may not only shape how we reproduce. The possibility of freezing female eggs could fundamentally change how we, as a society, think about reproduction. Dr. Lucy van der Wiel studies the social and political implications of egg freezing, and she argues that egg freezing is shifting society's idea of reproduction from making babies to making fertility. So, what is egg freezing, and how is it changing reproduction?
Egg freezing is a technology that women and anyone with ovaries can use to try and preserve their fertility for later on in life. Sometimes this is something that people do because they want to avoid age-related infertility in the future. And sometimes it's something that they do because they have been diagnosed with a particular condition, and either the disease itself or the treatment thereof can lead to infertility.
Egg freezing is only a small part of the larger set of assisted reproductive technologies, but it is unique in what it offers.
So, assisted reproduction used to be a set of technologies that was used primarily for people who wanted to have a child at present and found that they couldn't conceive. Now, with egg freezing, there's another concern that's been introduced. So, rather than trying to have a baby at present, it's really a technology for trying to preserve fertility, trying to keep your options open, for trying to have the choice to have a child in the future, but not make that commitment at the point of treatment. And that makes it into a very different kind of consideration to use these technologies.
The shift from making babies to managing fertility has opened up new frontiers for capitalism in some countries, like the US.
Typically, for IVF, you would work with patients who are, first of all, ready to conceive and who are finding that they have trouble with conceiving. When you look at the group of women or anybody with an ovary who would potentially freeze their eggs, you can really have a much broader group because you're not limited to the people who have an infertility problem, and you're not limited to people who've decided that they would like to have a child right now. So whereas now the average age is sort of in the late 30s, there are certainly initiatives where companies encourage marketing of younger women freezing their eggs.
Egg freezing is also creating new pressures and anxieties around women's reproductive choices because of how it changes the relationship between fertility and aging.
What you see happening is basically two movements. That on the one hand, there is a sense that infertility becomes relevant earlier on in women's lives. There is much more a sense that you have to be proactive about managing your fertility earlier on in life. And that can have some advantages because it can maybe avoid some people being involuntarily childless in the future. But at the same time, it can also raise concerns about potential exploitation and overtreatment and medicalization. On the other hand, you have the extension of fertility later on in life when you have frozen your eggs. And even though the chances of those eggs actually resulting in a child are usually quite slim, the possibility of it may still affect people's lives.
Egg freezing is expensive and it's not guaranteed to work. Yet, more and more women are choosing to freeze their eggs as they delay parenthood. Many argue that it's a technological solution to a social problem of precarious jobs, housing crisis, rising cost of living, and expensive childcare. In this complex landscape, how should women think about the choice to freeze their eggs?
Egg freezing, like any technology, reflects the political context in which it's introduced. It reflects a number of social norms and a number of cultural considerations that are being expressed through how people understand and use the technology. And so, in the case of egg freezing, you see that certain countries prohibit egg freezing. and they say we don't want women to have children later on in life, or we don't want women to have agency over their fertility on their own without a husband. In other countries, you see that egg freezing is highly commercialized. What I think is really important is that people are aware of social dimensions of reproduction in order to make informed choices that are not only based on knowing the medical specifics of a procedure, but they're also based on the social, cultural, and political context in which they make those choices.